Here we are at Van Nuys City Hall, and I'm with Eric Garcetti. He's the president of the Los Angeles City Council. We're actually here on Cesar Chavez Day, at least for the LA Unified School District, and a beautiful day in Van Nuys. Mr. Council President, thanks for taking the time
to be with you, Jack.
us.
Thank you.
Let's start with the budget.
Yeah.
I understand you're going to have for the next fiscal year $350 million budget deficit. Where do you start? You're the leader of the council. What are you going to do first, and what's the approach?
Well, we've been working the last 3 years in the deepest economic recession since the Great Depression to make sure that we look at structural change, to make sure that we don't carry a deficit every single year. The city of Los Angeles has to, by charter, balance its budget every single year. So unlike the feds who can print money, the state who can steal it, we actually have to balance it.
Okay.
And here we've done that successfully through extremely difficult times. 2 years ago, an early retirement program, which current employees stepped up to pay for, so it's not an additional burden in the future. We have downsized by about 4,500 civilian employees, our workforce, on the non-police and fire side, which is the lowest level since Tom Bradley left office, with 1 million more people. So we're showing that we can do as much with less, but like a household, like a business, you can't spend more than what you have. For the upcoming year, I've been very involved in our labor negotiations. We either tighten our belts together, we figure out a way to get through this, or else we have to employ harsher things like layoffs and furloughs. But after 2.5 weeks of really good negotiations, and it's my style to sit down with the union and to say, how can we do this together, to listen to their ideas for cost cutting, for boosting revenues, and we did that for 2 years. We have now struck a deal, needs to be ratified, but the biggest group of our civilian employees will now increase their retirement payments for their pensions and benefits from 6% to 11%. So this is almost a doubling of that at a time when we have to do that in our cities and states to be sustainable. If we can match that from the police and the fire, we'll be able to balance our budget for next year.
Now, what was with the selling all the public thing? I thought that was one of the dumbest ideas I ever heard. We have a $14 million in Studio City that you're aware of, you've seen. Finally, some calmer heads, including you, said, let's think long term on this.
Yeah, to sell off our great assets like our parking lots at a fire sale price at the lowest point in the market when real estate prices are at the rock bottom, to fill a hole for 1 year, and it's even just a part of the hole, and never be able to touch those for 50 more years. I was willing to go down the pathway to listen to what the market said, but a majority of those parking spaces were in my district, in Hollywood. The people of Los Angeles own those parking spaces. They will earn money in the future. They can be better managed, better run, but to sell them off basically for 50 years, the business community and the residential community in Hollywood told me we couldn't do that, and at the end I said, we've got to kill this deal.
So it was killed, and it was majority vote, but it was a pretty strong
it was unanimous.
Goodbye, unanimous.
Yeah,
we made a mistake thinking about this. Now,
absolutely.
Let's move on to something else.
And to that point, Jack, I think we can't look at one-time fixes. We really have to look at, I wonder who was around 15, 20 years ago that we inherited a lot of these labor deals, a lot of this structural deficit. I want to do something for my successor and my successor's successor, so that they don't have to wonder who put us in these bad deals. In an era of term limits, the temptation is, hey, get myself out of this year and give it to the next guy or gal. We can't do that for the city.
I, being a good Democrat myself, but I talk to a lot of people, Eric, and I've never seen such anti-labor feeling now, particularly DWP with the IBEW people, UTLA, because these people are getting such fantastic pensions, which were negotiated a long time ago, but such anger because the private sector people aren't getting these. So DWP, what's going to be done in that regard relative to their pensions for future employees?
Well, one thing I should say is that, the workers in America, workers in city government that come and work hard every single day, I've been out there with crews who fill potholes, who climb into our sewers, who pick up our trash. They didn't cause this economic downturn. And in fact, if you look at the public sector versus the private sector, they're usually paid still about 12% less, and they don't have Social Security, which people forget. When we looked at moving away from pensions to like a 401k like in the private sector, it would actually cost the taxpayers more money to do that because we'd start paying Social Security and because of the volatility. That said, there are serious changes that we have to make and that we are making. At the DWP, I'm proudest to have authored our ratepayer advocate motion, which now establishes and has successfully passed
by the voters,
almost overwhelmingly, that they can have a voice, somebody who will fight for them whenever there's a proposed rate increase, whether it's going to be for power, whether it's for water, or like last year when they said 28% power rate increase in the midst of this recession. finally there'll be somebody who can stand up for us, give an impartial, detailed response, and help our general manager over there turn DWP around, because there's no question, if we don't do anything, about 30 to 40% of all that we pay over there will go just towards pensions and health care benefits.
When I go to Hollywood, Eric, I'm pretty impressed what I see development-wise, starting with a few years ago, the Highland MTA subway place. Give us a quick little rundown of what's going on, and are you getting a lot of adverse publicity or feelings by some of the homeowners? Too much development?
It's actually been wonderful. I think for the homeowners and the neighborhood folks, they're glad to have a place to eat, to shop, and to have fun. You know, you can go in Hollywood to a movie at the ArcLight, which is the best place to see a movie in LA. You can go see a play at the Pantages. You can go to the farmers market on Sunday, the biggest farmers market in Southern California. And you know, you don't always have to get in a car to do it. So the neighbors right around love it. Now, we have a good problem now that Hollywood is busy. Before, it was the opposite. We didn't have any traffic. We didn't have any people. We had crime, prostitution, drug dealers. The average tourist stayed for 23 minutes in the 1980s. They did a study. They'd get off the bus, you know, go to the Chinese theater,
look around, get back
take
on
their
the
picture
bus.
and get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
Now it's a place they're staying overnight, and the taxes that we are generating from Hollywood for the entire city have gone up by 439% in the last decade. 439%. No other neighborhood can match that.
Meaning the bed tax,
our bed tax, our parking tax, our sales tax, our property taxes, because we invested in Hollywood and brought that up. Now it's a place, still has a lot of work to do, and I'm very focused on that, but it's a place we can be proud to take visitors. It's a place that we can spend time as Angelenos again.
2 years from now, this great city is going to look around and try to decide who should lead the city as the next mayor. And I've heard just generally, just little tweaks and this and that Mr. Eric Garcetti might be thinking about that. So could you just give us a little bit of your thinking on that possibility? And second part of that, Eric, is it takes a lot of money to run for mayor.
Sure
Do you
does.
think you have it in you to raise those funds, and is there enough support to, if you decide to go, put on a viable campaign?
Well, Jack, I love Los Angeles. I'm a fourth generation Angeleno. My great-grandparents grew up in Boyle Heights, both on the Mexican and the Jewish sides. My dad grew up in South LA, my mom in Central and then West LA, and I grew up here in the San Fernando Valley and now live in Silver Lake, previously in Echo Park. So, you know, I've seen this entire city. I love it. I care deeply about it, and as council president, I've been able to visit all parts of the city. I'm leaning that way pretty strongly because I care deeply enough about this moment in LA's history that we have to get back and continue to be on the right track. This is a great, great city, unmatched in the world, but too often we divide ourselves, we find what we're against instead of what we're for. And the neighborhoods that I've represented, I think, have been great laboratories, whether it's the pedestrian life in Silver Lake and the artists that are there, whether it's Atwater Village, which is like a slice of the valley over the hill, whether it's Hollywood's comeback. I've been able to see diverse neighborhoods come back when you just listen to them. So I'm right now kind of on a listening tour, talking to Angelenos, getting a great response. I'm strongly leaning that way, but I'm going to continue talking to my family and make a decision later this year.
And if you could tell us, what does your great former elected official DA father think about this?
He's smart enough to know I'm not going to give you advice on that decision. You got to own it. But he is a great friend and counselor to me and a great dad.
How old were you when he first got elected to the county DA's office?
You know, people think that I grew up in a political family. I didn't. My dad was a civil servant, a prosecutor his entire career. My mom ran a charitable foundation here in Los Angeles. It wasn't until the year I graduated from college that Dad ran and won. So I was kind of a fully formed person, got to be raised in the San Fernando Valley, living a nice anonymous life, and then suddenly Dad became the district attorney of Los Angeles after I graduated from college. It was wonderful to see him step up, to have the courage to do that, because when you do run, it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there. And then I was gone for most of the time he was in office. I was studying abroad during the first 4.5 years and saw the tail end of his time.
Okay, I want to go back just a little bit, because I have a friend now. He's become a pretty good friend of mine, and he's very high on you, and his name's Tom Hudnott.
Oh, sure, of course.
So tell me a little bit of your thoughts when you went to then Harvard.
Right.
It wasn't Harvard Westlake.
Right, no, it was
time.
not. No girls yet.
No girls at that time. What did you get to know Studio City at that time as a high school young man?
Besides Encino, where I was raised, you know, Studio City was my stomping grounds, and absolutely. I took the bus. Sometimes I'd catch a ride with a senior, but I'd usually just take the bus, the old RTD, as far back as elementary school, because I went to the public school at UCLA for my elementary school, UES. Then we take the bus.
On the campus there?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And we'd take the RTD bus home as an elementary school student, so I've always loved transit. And then I'd go back and forth on Ventura Boulevard as a high school student and a junior high school student. And you know, Studio City and Encino and the Valley, it was like every place and any place. I mean, I would see the police on Woodley Avenue where I grew up, because that's where the West and the East Valley are split, circling at the end of their shift. My parents and I had a community garden plot right there next to Encino Little League where I played ball.
It's still a plot.
Absolutely, and we fought back the proposed increases for how much it would cost to have a plot there this year when Rec and Parks proposed that. So I remember a valley that really was kind of a limitless place. Going to Harvard was interesting because there were a lot of kids from the West Side there too, and you know, the Valley was the kind of underdog there, and so I've always had a great love for the Valley, a great love of Studio City, and trying to preserve the scale of it. I think that's what also makes it unique. People know each other. It hasn't had out of control development, and I think that's an important thing to do. There might be some parts of LA that can handle more growth, more development, more density, but managing that in the Valley and other places at a reasonable rate is really important to me.
Tell me about this Naval Reserve.
Yes.
Why did you get into it? You're still an active reserve?
Yes. No.
I don't know of anybody in public life. It's a little, you know, the anti-military going back to the Vietnam War. So tell me your philosophical thinking about this at this part of your life.
Well, you know, in my family, my grandfather, who immigrated from Mexico when he was 1, only became a citizen when he volunteered in World War II and enlisted, was a sergeant in the Pacific Theater. And so I grew up kind of knowing that story and the importance of that in my family's history. My parents were very active against the Vietnam War when that happened, worked for Eugene McCarthy's campaign. So I also was raised in a family that tempered that wondered, you know, is the military the right way to go? My uncle, though, served in the Navy, and increasingly, not being somebody who grew up during Vietnam, but after it, I saw that our obligation to serve our country, whether it's as a teacher, whether it's in the military, whether it's a community volunteer, as something that we had gotten away from because the Vietnam era had made people distrust and mistrust government and the military so much. I used to teach international relations before I was elected. I've always been very interested in foreign policy at USC and Occidental College. Okay. And so, you know, I spent 2 summers in the jungles of Burma with a recently retired colonel who we were working with the Burmese democratic resistance there. And he said, you know, Eric, if you really want to see this through, you got to know the military and the intelligence worlds. And so for the last 5.5 years, I've been a U.S. Navy intelligence officer in this area, spend a weekend a month and 2 weeks on top of that. So it's about 45 days a year serving the country.
Very good. I want to know a little bit more about you play an instrument. What else makes Eric Garcetti a well-rounded individual?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Jack, because this can be an all-encompassing job when somebody on a Sunday at the grocery store comes up and says, Mr. Garcetti, I want to talk to you about my street and my potholes, and I love that part of this job. But it is really important to get the perspective of being just, you know, a regular person every single day. I almost went into music. I'm a pianist, jazz piano. Really? I compose musicals while I was at Columbia. I wrote something called The Varsity Show, which Rodgers and Hammerstein and Hart all wrote as undergrads. I work out probably 5-6 days a week, whether it's basketball, kickboxing, yoga, stair climbing.
Which of those are you the best at?
The best at?
Boxing
I can climb a stair pretty well.
Well, you're obviously pretty thin, and
I keep fit.
Good shape.
And then, you know, the other thing I love doing is just exploring the city. I mean, I will take an afternoon with my family, and the nice thing about LA is if you ever don't like the city, drive somewhere, and 10 minutes later, you'll love it again.
Right, because you're out with somewhere else.
Exactly.
And so on. Okay, we're going to have to finish this up because you have to go run the council.
Yeah, see people coming in.
Yeah, and we want to thank you, and we've learned a little. What we're trying to do with these interviews, Eric, is for art. We have a website now, and some other people are picking it up. Television doesn't do much anymore because they cut back themselves. So we're trying to let the public know about those people, such as yourself, who might become mayor or run for mayor, and we'll see what happens.